Luigi's coins. Luigi once numbered among the finest jewel thieves in the city. He never made as much money as some of the gangsters he came up with, but he also never got caught. Alas, a life of crime doesn't offer the best retirement plan. And so when the time came for Luigi to hang up his sneakers, he settled down to live out his days in a quiet, simple shack at the edge of the woods. He appreciated the solitude, but at times he admitted something was missing. He wanted a television. He planned one more heist. More of a long con really, but most certainly a victimless crime. It was common practice those days to bury the dead with a coin on each eye, so that the recently deceased souls could pay the ferryman to transport them to the next world. Luigi didn't believe in that stuff. Mumbo jumbo. A waste of coins if you asked him. Every other week, he would make a call to his old friend Greg, a security guard at the old cemetery in the bad part of town, and asked him whether fresh graves have been dug. The grave diggers at the old cemetery were decent men. They dug their graves shallow. Maybe they wanted the dead to feel the rain. But they were a little lazy. Either way, it made life easy for Luigi, who would dig up a fresh corpse, swipe off the coin of its eyes, then rebury the body. On a good night, he could dig up 5 former human beings and leave with 10 coins. Then he'd head home to his shack, put the coins in an old ceramic case, and count the days until he had enough saved up for the color TV. One morning, Luigi sat drinking bitter coffee and reading the newspaper. The appliance giant was having a one-day sale the next day, the newspaper said. All TVs half off, including the big one Luigi always dreamed of. He finished his breakfast and went to count his coins. Only about 20 away, he estimated. It would be a hard night, the most coins he'd ever gathered, but if he put his nose to the grindstone, he could get a TV and finally be done with the thievery game forever. He dialed Greg's number. "Any chance you guys got 20 new bodies since the last time I got there?" Luigi asked. "Business is slow," Greg answered. "I haven't seen a funeral for days. Modern medicine, you know how it is." "The appliance giant is having a sale," Luigi said. "I can almost afford that TV." Greg the security guard fell silent for a few moments. They were old friends, but Luigi knew Greg was uncomfortable with their arrangement. Getting Luigi out of the cemetery for good would help them both sleep better at night. "There's that ancient section, way out back, next to the mausoleums," he said. "Bodies a little deeper, the coins a little rarer. Might be enough to get you that TV before dawn, I don't know." "That would be perfect," Luigi said. "You won't ever hear from me again after this, I promise." "Gates unlocked," Greg said. That night he went to work, silently crossing the cemetery into the restricted area Greg told him about. It was colder on this side of the grave, which Luigi appreciated. He dug twice as fast to keep warm. Soon enough, his shovel thwacked against the first coffin. He opened it up. 2 silver coins with skulls on them gleamed in the moonlight. He snatched them up. Then his blood froze. The eyes of a corpse were staring back at him. That couldn't be right. Any undertaker worth his salt would have closed the lids before putting the coins on those eyes. He shivered and started shoveling dirt back on the body without reclosing the coffin. The next 3 corpses unearthed the same problem. The coins increased in their rareness and value, but each time he removed them, the dead stared back blankly at him. Each time he panicked and shoveled dirt back on top without closing the coffin. Each set of eyes seemed more lifelike than the last. By the 5th body, he could swear the eyes were watching as he shoveled. By the 7th, he could swear he saw one blink. The coins were even rarer than he'd hoped. They were certainly enough for the TV. He didn't even bother to refill the final grave. He was never coming back. It is Greg's problem now. The sun was up by the time he reached his shack. The appliance giant would open soon. He headed back into his old truck and drove into town. The salesman balked when Luigi tried to pay for the TV with a vase full of old coins. He called the manager over, who pulled out a magnifying glass. "These are rare coins for sure," the manager said. "We'll take them. The TV's yours. My guy will be here to load it into your truck." Luigi drove home, set up the TV, turned on his favorite crime show, and fell immediately into a deep, dreamless sleep. He awoke sometime after midnight. The TV was still on. A show he'd never seen. A man sitting alone on a couch in a quiet shack. It was Luigi. He stood up. The version of himself on the TV did the same. He walked toward the TV and changed the channel. The Luigi on the TV did the same. Otherwise, the image did not change. He switched the channel again, then switched the channel again. The Luigi show was playing on every single one. He figured there must be some sort of a camera inside the set. He got up and took a closer look. For the first time, the Luigi on TV did not mirror him. Something different off screen distracted the TV Luigi. A knock had come on his door. The on-screen Luigi looked very frightened. Luigi watched in horror as a shadow appeared behind the doppelganger. There was something else in the shack. He spun around, but in the real world, he was still alone. Whatever it was only coming from the TV character. Off-screen, you could hear a window smash open. Footsteps crunching over shattered glass. Luigi screamed out a warning into the television. Maybe they heard him. 7 corpses fell upon the TV Luigi. They tore at him for a few moments, then receded as quick as they'd come. The TV Luigi lay frozen on the ground for a few moments. Finally, he got up and turned his face to the monitor. His eyes were gone. Luigi tried desperately to turn off the TV. Nothing happened. He put his foot through the screen. Sparks flew everywhere. He kicked and kicked and kicked until finally his foot went through the screen and the image blinked off. All that work for nothing. He shot up the couch. It had all been a dream. The TV was off and intact. He relaxed, but for a moment it was slightly after midnight. He heard soft scratching at the front door, a loud thud against his only window, footsteps in the darkness behind him. Something switched on the TV. A little thinner. Ava was what the waitresses called a big girl. Her legs were as wide and strong as oaks. Her forearms were as thick and firm as saplings. She took up more space and breathed more air than some people thought a woman should. And they reminded her every time she squeezed herself onto the bus, huffing and snickering as if her ears weren't exquisitely attuned to sub-vocalized ridicule. The horror of those breathless bus rides, contracting and contorting herself to avoid brushing against seatmates, was the major reason she bought her truck. She chose an older Ford, as sturdy and practical as she was. Tonight, driving home after the dinner shift, she glorified in her self-contained solitude. Moonlight filtered through the branches and dappled the road with light. She smiled. Ava had spent her 20s trying to whittle herself down, collecting an eating disorder or two along the way. Now at 32, she had forgiven her body for its unruly dimensions, allowing it to exist without censure. She was wondering if she had the right ingredients for tuna carbonara when a cat streaked through across the road and under her tire. Ava slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The dark mass in the rearview mirror wasn't moving, heart juddering in her chest. She pulled over and climbed out of the truck. She turned on her flashlight app and found the broken feline crushed against the pavement. Her eyes flooded with tears. The cat wore a jeweled collar. Someone, somewhere, was waiting for a beloved pet that would never return home. She carried the limp, furry bundle to the side of the road where she could look for a tag. When the light from her phone illuminated the crone, she almost swallowed her tongue. The old woman was nearly as tall as she was, with a mane of wild bone and iron hair. She reached out her long, gnarled hands. At first, Ava thought the older woman meant to strangle her. Then she remembered the soft, damp body in her arms. She held out the cat like an offering. The crone snatched it up.
"Thinner,"
whispered the old woman, clutching her dead pet. The timbre of her voice was like an eel wind stirring up long dead leaves. The next morning, Ava felt strangely ravenous. She supposed it was being so close to death the night before. She shrugged and padded into the kitchen, where she made a Brocdonigan 6-egg omelette with mushrooms and gruyere. She devoured it and mopped up the eggy, cheesy remains with 4 slices of buttered toast. Then she washed it all down with 3 cups of milky coffee. When she was finished, she debated running in the bathroom for a quick purge. It had been 3 years since she stopped vomiting and spent her life savings on fixing her teeth. She told herself she could probably throw up a few times without wrecking her veneers. No, you can't. Not again. She took a deep breath and emailed her therapist. She explained the accident, the cat, the crone, and her sudden, uncontrollable hunger. She spent the rest of her day in her garden, methodically pulling weeds and trying to ignore the burning sensation in her gut. When it was time to put on her waitress uniform, she cringed with dread. She remembered the bad old days, where she tended to retain water after a binge and purge cycle. She fervently hoped she would be able to zip the dress past her midsection. But when she tried, the strangest thing happened. The uniform was loose. Cap sleeve gaped around the upper arms. The waist was decidedly roomy. Ava grinned. It was a miracle, a divine reprieve. And then she remembered the dead cat. The crone's whisper. She shivered with fear and a sickly kind of hope with the realization she might been cursed. The body. Carla opened her eyes and pulled the comforter tightly around her. She'd woken up before the alarm yet again. She closed her eyes and spent a few seconds trying to will herself back to sleep before giving up. She stared at the ceiling for a few more seconds and then rolled over. When she did, her face and chest smacked up against another person. Carla screamed out and recoiled so hard in the other direction, she rolled off the bed. Carla had not gone to bed with anyone the night before, and her boyfriend David had no way of getting into her apartment, which she was certain she'd locked and deadbolted. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" she called up from the floor of the bed. Almost involuntary. No answer. Carla slowly lifted her head above the mattress. There was definitely a person in her bed, obscured almost entirely by her comforter, except by their feet. "What are you doing here?" she asked again, more loudly. The person didn't move. "I'm calling the cops," she yelled, though she knew her phone was on the other side of the bed. Very quietly, Carla stood up and tiptoed around the bed toward her phone resting on the nightstand. She did not take her eyes off the person in her bed. As she slowly reached down for her phone, she instead kept reaching all the way to the comforter, overcome with a mixture of curiosity and dread. "Last warning," she shouted as she gripped the edge of the comforter, and then, in one fast motion, she pulled it off. In shock, Carla tripped backwards up against the dresser, knocking over several framed photos. Her heart stopped beating. For seconds, she just stood in silence, her eyes searching up and down the naked body. "What is this?" she asked nobody in particular. It took more than 10 seconds for Carla to fully process she was looking at her own body. "What are you?" she asked. Though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer, she reached down and brushed several strands of her long brown hair from her face. It was hers. Her hair, her eyes, her neck, torso, legs, all of it. She ran her fingers down the length of it. The skin was cold. There was no heartbeat, no pulse. "Is this a dream?" Carla asked, closing her eyes and focusing hard. "Am I dreaming right now?" She opened her eyes, and again her body was still there. The loud knock at her door startled her so much she yelped, "Hey, it's me!" She heard David call out. "Sorry, I'm a little early. I can hang out for a little bit if you're not ready for brunch yet." Carla broke into a sweat, her eyes never leaving her bodies. 1 minute, I'm getting dressed." An instinct kicked into Carla and she got to work, grabbing both of her body's arms and pulling it onto the floor with a loud thud. "You okay?" David asked from behind the door. "I'm fine, 1 minute." Carla dragged her body into the bathroom, knelt down and lifted it into the shower as quickly as she could. An arm dangled off the edge. She folded it into the shower, spun out of the bathroom and closed the door behind her. She leaned against it, taking deep breaths, trying to regain her composure. "Okay," she whispered, and walked out the door. She opened it, not fully knowing what to expect. A thought entered her mind: "I'm a ghost and he won't see me." But David greeted her with a cheerful, "Hi, how'd you sleep?" She stood in silence for a few seconds. "You okay?" David asked. "You don't look so hot." "I'm fine," Carla reassured him and herself. "Do I seem fine?" David laughed. "I mean, you look a little pale and you're sweating a little bit. But you might be coming down with something, but otherwise, yeah." Okay, Carla nodded. "Do I seem fine?" David asked. Carla chuckled nervously. "You're always fine, David. Hey, let's just go to brunch right now." "Oh, are you sure? I know I'm early." No, it's fine. I'm hungry anyway." "Gotcha," David replied. "I just need to use your bathroom real quick before we go." "No," Carla yelled, much too loudly. "Sorry, I mean, let's just beat the crowd. You can go to the restaurant, right?" David flashed her with a confused smile. "I really gotta go. It'll take me like 1 minute." "It's just a 10-minute walk to the..." David brushed past her toward the bathroom. "In the amount of time we've spent arguing about this, I already could have been done." Carla watched him walk in, turn on the light, and shut the door. Her heart stopped. She'd closed the shower curtain, hadn't she? Carla honestly couldn't remember. So frenzied and panicked she'd have been just moments earlier. She'd listened carefully, expecting David to scream out at any moment. The seconds stretched out into years. Suddenly she heard the faucet run and shut off, and the door swung open. David walked back to her. "Okay, let's get some food." He smiled tenderly at her. Out of nowhere, Carla put her hands on David's arms, and then she hugged him. He hugged her back twice as hard. "What's that for?" he asked. "I just really love you," she said, understanding that something unknowable and vast was being exchanged between them. All during brunch, Carla was distracted thinking about her discovery that morning. She knew she'd have to deal with it somehow when she got home. How does one dispose of one's own body anyway? She puzzled. But another part of her seemed almost certain the body could have gone when she returned. After Carla and David parted ways, she took the long way back to her apartment, not wanting to confront what was waiting there. She walked inside to the bathroom, closed the door, turned on the light, and closed her eyes and counted to 5. When she opened them, her body was still there in the shower. Carla leaned back against the counter. What am I going to do about this? She wondered. She left the bathroom and walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water. Suddenly, she stopped in her tracks. The shower curtain was open. It had been open when David went to the bathroom earlier. She walked back to the shower. There was no way anybody could have walked from the door to the toilet and back without seeing her body there. Was it just a figment of her imagination? She kneeled down and felt its cold skin again. She touched her nose, ears, hands, feet. It was real. She was sure of it. David descended the stairs into his basement and turned on the lights. A black tarp laid on the far edge of the cold concrete floor. He walked over to it, knelt down, and pulled the tarp back to reveal his own face. This was what, the 7th or 8th time today he'd done so. He grunted and grabbed his body and hoisted it onto his shoulder in one fell swoop and carried it back to the stairs. It had been 14 hours or so since David had discovered his own dead body lying next to him that morning. But the shock had worn off almost entirely. Truth be told, he'd surprised himself how quickly he was able to put it out of mind. Wait until night time, he told himself. Cover it, bury it, forget it, it never happened. David had dragged the body into the basement and wrapped it in tarp before driving to Carla's. When he'd seen Carla's body in the shower, despite having just talked with her, touched her, hear her speak, he understood. Something was awry in this world. Something way beyond his comprehension. Cover it, bury it, forget it. None of this ever happened. In the moonlight, David dragged his body to the far east corner of his backyard. He picked the shovel up and started digging in silence. Be quick, get it over with. He dug as fast as he could, focusing only on the matter at hand. The sooner his body was buried, the sooner he began the process of blocking the day entirely from his memory. Suddenly, he heard a scraping sound coming from the yard behind his. Hushed at first, then louder. David walked gently to the fence and poked his head up over it. In the moonlight, David could make out a man digging with a shovel. It was his neighbor Mike Gray holding a shovel. Next to where he was digging, there was a body wrapped in a white sheet. Perhaps sensing he was being watched, Mike spun around and saw David. The two of them just stood there, looking at each other for a bit. Mike opened his mouth to begin to say something, but then stopped himself. The night was perfectly still and silent. Something is awry in the universe. It's beyond your control. Dig, bury, forget. Mike nodded at David and slowly resumed digging. David left the fence, walked back to his shovel and his body, and did the same.